Hello, my name is Dr. Aslie. I'm a board-certified fellowship-trained orthopedic spine surgeon, and I'm the medical director here in Sacramento Spine Treatment Center. In this segment, I'll be discussing with you the latest development in terms of treatment of osteoporotic spine. I will probably need 2 to 3 hours to go over everything in detail. However, I'm going to try to summarize it in about 15 to 20 minutes. As you know, the gold standard for fixation of spine is pedicle screw. It gets its grip from cancellous bone. As we age, the bone gets weak. And that has posed a significant challenge to spine surgeons, especially with the aging population. There's a big body of research trying to solve that problem. There are a few things that can improve the performance of a pedicle screw. The performance of pedicle screw is measured in terms of torque and pull-out strength. As you can see, you can have an expandable screw, you can have a larger core diameter, you can have a different trajectory to get as much cortical bone as possible, you can have a cement augmentation, or you can have a vertebroplasty and then put the screw in. And I will talk about these in a different segment. Most of the body of the research that we have is a bench study. The problem is that bone is not a dead tissue. It's not brick or wood. It's a live tissue. It's constantly being turned over, and it responds to forces in a manner that we don't completely understand. It's very difficult to get the knowledge that we obtain on a bench study and apply that to human body. For example, in an expandable screw, once you expand that bone, once you open it, what you're doing, you're crushing the cancellous bone, you're causing microfracture, you're introducing a pattern that body doesn't recognize. The first thing it's going to do is going to try to absorb it. And I don't believe osteoporotic cancellous bone has enough power to re-grab the screw that's being used for fixation. The other problem is inherent to pedicle screw itself. As you know, when the pedicle screw was invented, it was uniaxial. It was very difficult to instrument. We invented polyaxial tulip, and that helped the instrumentation significantly. However, it didn't solve the problem entirely. This is the example of a tulip. If you look down the shaft of the screw, the tulip moves in a circular fashion. Now, even if you adjust the screws height-wise, which is still very difficult thing to do completely, if you move the tulip to one side, that limits the motion on the other plane significantly. And if the tulip is bent all the way, that gets pretty much locked. That leads to a phenomenon that I call it Wolverine phenomena from the X-Men. My personal experience is that once I have a long construct and I set the rod in and I adjusted the height as good as I can, when you put that cap on, the last half a turn to quarter of a turn, you feel a resistance. And then you hear the squeaking sounds of titanium coming together. That last half turn to quarter of a turn resistance is actually tulip trying to kick the screw in a certain direction that it has to kick. Therefore, what happens is that once you put the screws in and you connect them all with a rod, the screws start fighting each other. The weak screws loose, and then the stronger screws get weaker because they just compensated themselves for the weaker screws. What I'm trying to get at is that at this point, we have no way of knowing what is our fixation inside human body. And that's even before patient hits the recovery room. Yet alone, what is the fixation? We don't even know what the fixation is a month down the road. We wanted to solve that problem. We didn't want it to improve upon something that we already have, like a pedicle screw that opens into this amazing thing with an amazing grip. Because still, no matter what you do, pedicle screw is going to be inside the vertebral body, which is cancellous bone. We wanted to set goals first and then move backward from there to see if those goals are achievable. First thing that we wanted to have is a device that is rigid under physiologic stress, so it can last and it can let the fusion to take place, and would behave the same inside the body as over the bench. We said, well, why stop here? Let's come up with a perfect instrument. A perfect instrument for osteoporotic spine would be flexible under superphysiologic stress, so it can have ability to absorb energy. For example, if the patient falls or gets into an accident, it doesn't end up with a catastrophic bone failure. We thought that this was a dream. However, I'm here to tell you that it does exist, and we have it, and it's a reality, and I'll explain to you later. we knew that the key to success is the lamina. Lamina is part of the vertebrae that's affected with osteoporosis the least. It's a cortical bone, and two flat plates have sharp edges. My experience is that even in elderly population, when I have to go back and do my laminotomy or whatever, the lamina is still very, very tough and rigid. The current instrumentations that we have, like sublaminar wires, sublaminar cables, hooks, or claws, the metal type, they grab the lamina on both ends like a coker. We wanted an instrumentation that actually holds onto the lamina in a 360-degree fashion and actually holds onto it. To do that, this device had to be flexible. Then we started looking at different materials. We looked at polyester straps, and they were very weak. Then we came across this material called Dyneema. It is based on polyethylene molecules. The molecules are very long, and when they connect to each other, the tensile strength is very, very good. If you go to YouTube and put down Dyneema rope, you see a test that compares the same size Dyneema cable to same size steel cable. Actually, Dyneema outperforms the steel cable. In Australia, they're trying to get away from steel cable winches, and they're going with Dyneema rope. This strap right here by itself, this strap is rated to 150 plus pounds, so above 150 pounds. Then the next question is, how do we transition from the strap to a rod? And we had to invent our device, which is ALPS, which stands for Laminar Plating System. It's a contoured plate, thin plate, that sits against the lamina. It turns out that designing this plate was very, very complex task. Every bend has a function. Every corner has a function. And then there is a post that sits with a hole in it that has a clamp, and a tulip attaches to it. This is a demonstration right here. The strap originates from the back of the plate and comes around, and we use a 26 gauge wire, a flexible wire, which is very flexible, cannot cause any neurological damage, to pass it underneath the lamina. We have a passer that has a slit and has a bend. All you have to do is just feed the wire, and it pre-bends the wire, and the wire skives off underneath the lamina and appears on the other side. And once you pull the wire, there's not going to be any neurological damage. It's not like passing a sublaminar wire. Sublaminar wires are very thick, and there are some evidence of some neurological damage. However, this wire is just a guide wire. It's not an actual structural wire. Once you do that, this wire, you pass it through the hole in the base of the plate, through the clamp, and once you do that, you pull the strap through, and it's much easier to do this inside the patient because you can put tension on the straps. And one surgeon can do this whole thing, doesn't need an assistant. And once you pull the straps through, as you can see right here, the lamina is right here. As you pull this, then we have a tensioner that's very light. You hold it with one hand and put it underneath the tulip, and you tension the strap to the tension that you want. Once you tension this strap, there's a screwdriver that comes down, and you turn the set screw, and this brings down the clamp and clamps the strap, and then you release this. And once you release this, that's your construct. That's simple, and single surgeon can do it without any need for assistance. Now, there are a few things about this device that I need to talk about. This configuration of the strap attachment to the plate with the two origin from the back and going through the clamp causes two important things. One is that the plate has a 3-point fixation to the back of the lamina, therefore it's very stable. And once the clamp comes down, the two straps become two independent systems. So if one breaks, the other one can continue its function. Therefore, there's redundancy in this system. And this is the example of the device on the spine. Now let's talk about biomechanics of this device. We have tested this device, and this device consistently fails at 130 pounds, so it can withstand about 130 pounds. We've looked at the literature, and the best number that we can come up with for a pedicle screw with a cement augmentation, which is really something that you don't want to do. It's just a road of no return, one-way street. Even in that situation, the best number that I've seen is 80 pounds. This device is 130 pounds. That's 260 pounds per level. And because it's grabbing cortical bone, it should last and should behave the same inside the body as opposed to on the bench. And there's something even more important about this device. This device was very stable from 0 to 100 pounds. From 100 to 130 pounds, it actually flexes off the lamina for about 2 millimeters, which makes this device bimodal, rigid under physiologic stress and flexible under superphysiologic stress. Has that capability, and you can engineer where you want that flexibility with the thickness of the plate or the straps. In our first generation, I don't think we're going to be going for that flexibility, because last thing we want to have hardware failure, but it's definitely something that this device is capable of, and it's in the future. A couple other things about this device. The post that you see is not oriented in a 90 degrees. Due to the fact that the lamina actually slopes down and sideways, the post slopes up and sideways to compensate for that. What that does is that when you look down the spine, it makes the axis of the rotation perpendicular to the spine, which takes full advantage of the range of motion of the tulip, which should make placement of the rod a lot easier. There's a significant amount of advantages for this device. This device is extremely stable in extension and lateral rotation because it spans the back of the lamina all the way from the pedicular origin to pedicular origin. And of course, we know what it does in flexion. Now, the mode of failure for this device is that strap pulling through that clamp. Therefore, the Achilles heel for this device is that clamp. Now, on top of the construct, let's say if you have a long construct, on top, you don't have to cut the strap. You can put the strap through a secondary clamp and clamp the strap to the rod, which is a much beefier clamp. At that point, we haven't done the test yet, so we don't know when it fails, but we're estimating that device should last about 200 pounds, which makes that level about 400 pounds, which makes this device really indestructible. Now, as I said, we've done repetitious study, and from 0 to 130 pounds, this device behaves reversibly. Everything is reversible. Nothing gets destroyed, nothing. And then that strap slipping is the mode of failure. The other things I need to say about this device is that you don't need any fluoroscopy, you don't need navigation, chance of malpositioning is 0, and all the metal components always visible. Now, I'm going to introduce you to another concept, which is very complex, but I'll just brush over. I categorize instrumentation of the spine into two categories, direct and indirect. And it's very important to understand the difference, why it makes a big difference. Direct is a device that actually clamps down to the spine first, and then you put the rod over. Indirect is an instrumentation that clamps into the rod first, and you bring the spine to it. For example, in my category, direct examples of direct is pedicle screw and ALPS, which is our device. The problem is that pedicle screw penetrates the bone. In indirect, you have the hooks, universal clamps, and sublaminar wires. Well, the direct device is a rigid fixation. Indirect is not a rigid fixation. And the most important concept that you need to understand is that the indirect device, because it pulls the spine to the device, causes significant stress at the lamino-pedicular junction, which if there's any bone failure, that's where it's going to fail. And this device, because it's a direct category, it does not, because it grabs the lamina. It doesn't put stress at the lamino-pedicular junction. Why that's important? Because the device itself doesn't use a certain amount of capability of that area, and it saves it all for activities. I know it's a very difficult concept, but I just want to brush over it. As you can see, this device has capability of lowering the instrument failure in osteoporotic spine to as low as it can go. I know you have some questions, but this device is truly a breakthrough because it signifies two important things. One, it's redundant, and has two, is bimodal, which should protect the spine, osteoporotic spine, from catastrophic failure. I hope you enjoyed this segment and have a nice day.